What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Leader the Flock, man, coming at you with my number two video game console of all time in the countdown. Number two is one of my personal favorites in the game system that I own the most games for ever, and that is the NES. And the NES had different versions of it, but we sticking with the original NES that was released back in like 1986, if I'm not mistaken, here in the United States. And the most popular edition of it was the 299 version, which was the US bundle version. I believe the one I had was this one here. It came with two controllers. Yes, two controllers. I had the light gun, if I'm not mistaken. It came with Super Mario Brothers and Duck Hunt. So not bad at all, considering a lot of systems come out and they gave you far less after this system was even released, and it was even more. So I have no problem with it. I'm gonna just get into a few things, man, on how it all came about and that whole deal. We just sit back and chill. I'm trying to be a little more detailed on this one, just to give you an idea of how far the system has come and why it's still as popular as it is, and why it's number two, of course. Holds a personal space in my heart, man, because I love this system. I still own one. Alright, now the Nintendo Entertainment System, which is the abbreviated version, NES, is an 8-bit video game console. It was first released by Nintendo in Japan back in 1983 as the Family Computer, or popularly known here in the States as the Famicom, back in 1983, as I said. And it got here back in 1985, and it was basically out worldwide by 1987. Now, of its time, it was the best selling game console, and it helped revitalize the US video game industry following the video game crash of 1983. I'll get into that later, why it was a video game crash in 1983. Now, it was the single greatest, voted in 2009, the single greatest video game console in history by IGN on a field of 25 systems. Now, worldwide, the system ended up selling 61.91 million copies worldwide up until this date. And they used the ROM cartridges, game pack, whatever you want to call it. And as I stated before, it came with a controller point and an expansion pack, which a lot of people didn't realize. Now, the best-selling games on this system was Super Mario Brothers, of course, which is a pack-in game at $40 million. 40 million units sold. Super Mario Brothers 3, which was at 18 million, and Super Mario Brothers 2, which is at 10 million. Now, you would have made a bet with me. I would have bet that Zelda was up there, but I guess a lot of people wasn't buying Zelda like we thought they were. Now, upon its release, Nintendo was already successful at the arcade games such as Donkey Kong, Donkey Kong Jr., and Popeye. Now, the Famicom, the Japanese version, it started to grow momentum, but it took a long time for it to do so. The system didn't get popular worldwide until it got popular here in the United States. It's kind of like how when Atari discovered that Coleco was, demonstrating a bunch of games and stuff like that with the Donkey Kong and all. It was just a lot of stuff that went on, like shady business practices, and Nintendo was trying their best to keep from being in the middle of that type of stuff. So they postponed production for about a year or two before they really realized, okay, now we're able to do it, because you had a lot of that pirate and stuff going on, and they tried to do everything they could to keep that from happening. I'll get into that in a little bit as well, as far as like having a block chip, a 10 NES chip, and all of that. There's a lot of stuff, man, I had to read up on and really realize that was going on that I wasn't aware of. Trust me, it was a lot. Now, when Nintendo was actually ready to come out and put these games out here in the forefront, they released 18 launch titles. That's a big lineup as far as like having launch titles. I mean, they had an impressive lineup, so to speak, but like I said before, no launch titles never ever surpassed what the Dreamcast did. Those were the greatest launch titles of all time. And I'm gonna get into the launch titles. You had 10-Yard Fight, Baseball, Clue Land, game I still never played to this day, Duck Hunt, Donkey Kong Jr. Math, wow, Excitebike, Golf, Gyromite, Hogan's Alley, Ice Climber, Kung Fu, which I still have to this day, Mock Rider, Pinball, Stack Up, Tennis, Wild Gunman, Wrecking Crew, and Super Mario Brothers. Some varieties of these launch games contain Famicom chips with an adapter inside the cartridge so they would play on North American consoles as well as, the Famicom console. So it was still cool, a cool lineup. I believe it was a cool, decent lineup. Now I'm gonna get into some of the peripherals in this game. Now I did state earlier that they had a US Deluxe version that was out for like $300, but now that I think about it, I don't think that's the one I had. I believe I had the regular. I forgot what it was called. It's at the tip of my tongue. Maybe it was called the Action Set. I believe that's what it was called, the Action Set. That was at $199. That included the robot, the gun, the two controllers, and the 2 games, Gyromite, Duck Hunt. I'm not sure, man. It was such a long time ago exactly which one I had, but I know they had like 3 or 4 different versions of it. You had like the triple game pack that had Super Mario, Duck Hunt, World Class Track Meet that came with the power pad. Now, with that being said, let me segue into the peripherals. Some of the peripherals they had were, they were cool. You had the Power Glove, which to me was one of the worst game peripherals of all time. You had the different controllers that they had, the NES Advantage, the NES Max. Let's not even talk about the gun. The light gun was cool for maybe a couple months, but you had to play it. Sometimes you had to play it like in the dark because otherwise all you get is that goofy dog laughing at you because you can't hit anything. So that's just to name a few. Now, with some of the games, they had this thing called third-party licensing. That was kind of crazy because you had games that came out like unlicensed games. Now, if a lot of you may or may not remember games like RBI Baseball, they were made by Tengen. Those games came out on differently made cartridges. I can't even describe the shape. Maybe I'll put it up or something like that. I don't know. Depending on how I feel. It's showing you how the actual cartridges look. You notice that they were different. They weren't as similar as like the regular gray standard Nintendo looking games. Then it came out with some really bad ones, man, that just nobody even bought. I remember them coming out with a game called Bible Adventures. That was crazy. It's like, I have nothing against religion and all that, but video game is a way to escape some certain things, and a lot of people didn't really want to get into that stuff. So I don't know what they were thinking with it. I know that was listed like one of the worst gaming ideas of all time. I stayed away from it. So I just looked at it one day and I was like, wow, nobody's even trying to even get into that game. Now, the point that I was alluding to earlier with the video game crash was a part like with Atari. Atari had video game developers making these games. They would put like far embellished artwork on the covers of their games, and then when you open the game and you get the finished product, it looked nothing like what you was anticipating. So they were like trying to stay clearly away from that. Anything that Nintendo released, they wanted to have the Nintendo seal of approval, if you ever noticed that on their boxes. So you had games like when Pac-Man came out, E.T. and all that stuff. Those games looked good on the cover because that's all you got was the cover art. And then when you open those games were trash. The games were ass. They sucked. So that's just basically what they want to stay away from. Nintendo wanted no parts of that. Now let's talk about some of at the time was the most popular game system. Still one of the most popular game systems of all time. And it grew so popular that some small video game rental shops, they began buying their own copies of Nintendo games and renting them out to customers for around the same price as, say, a video cassette, a VCR tape, for a few days. Now, we know Nintendo wasn't going to receive any profit from the practice of this initial cost. And just like unlike movie rentals, the newly released games could hit short sales and be available for rent the same day the games came out. Now, they tried to take steps in stopping game rentals, but didn't take any form of legal action until Blockbuster Video began to make game rentals at a larger scale service. And they claimed that allowing customers to rent games would significantly hurt their sales and drive up the cost of the games. Nintendo lost that lawsuit, but didn't win on a claim of copyright infringement. So Blockbuster was just banned from including the copyrighted instruction booklets with their rented games. So in compliance with the ruling, they just decided to do their own little shortcut instruction. And be honest with you, when you run a game, how many times did you actually read the book anyway? First thing we would say if you pick that thing up, like, are you really gonna read the book? You really gonna read the book? Pick that damn game up and play it, man. You'll figure it out. Alright, now with all the good being said about the game, there was a few flaws in the game, and I'm gonna just get into really just the major flaw that was for me. Now, when they released the NES in the US, the design styling was deliberately different from that of the other game consoles. They wanted to have a distinguished product, and especially from those who had the poor reputation following the video game crash, like I said back before. So they tried to resemble the front load mechanism of a VCR. Now, that was a good idea, but the fact that they used the 72 pin deal that was in the back of the system, that thing started to wear out every time you put that cartridge in and out, take that game in and out, which was the reason why as a kid at 8-9 years old, you had to master how to put that game in there after a while, because it began wearing out the pins and people were blowing the cartridges and all that. And a lot of times that wasn't really what was wrong with it. It was just the fact that the pin was all bent up inside of the system. So that was the one knock on the game, and that was something that just it was a pain in the ass until they came out with another version, which was the top loader. And by that time, the Sega Genesis was kicking ass anyway, so not too many people were really checking for Nintendo after that. Alright, hopefully, man, this helped everybody figure out, man, the type of stuff that this company had to go through just to get their game out there, and what they had to go through to keep afloat for as long as they did. In my eyes, it's ranked number 2 of all time, and hopefully you can see why I have it at that number. Stay tuned. I'd have number 1 up shortly. That's all I got for y'all, man. I'm out your ear. Peace.